Yo, what is up? What is up? How's everybody doing? I'm super excited. Today is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the fathers. I am also a newly father, so I have been celebrating today, which is one of the reasons why I have time to do this because my awesome wife is taking care of our daughter. So, thank you guys so much for joining. As always, thank you, Burgerman J, for coming to the stream. It's gonna be a good one. I have yet to read this chapter. I know that it came out last weekend, but I haven't had a chance to, and I will be reacting to the official Viz translation. So, thanks, man. Thanks, Burgerman J. If you are new here or you're watching it back, just know that the chapter is in. Hold on, here we go. Over here. My logo is superimposed over it, but it's a little translucent, and so you can follow over there. So, without further ado, let's jump into this sweet chapter. So, Chapter 1185, Minja Own Beeswax. Mind Own Beeswax. Wow. Sounded like a dum-dum trying to read that. So we have a reader request that says, I can't wait for Luffy to eat this. Hancock practices her cooking by Masako. Interesting. This must have been during that time skip where she was like bringing all the food to him. Pretty cool. But there's not much going on here. The meat looks interesting. The meat that Luffy usually eats is like off the bone. So, very interesting that this looks just like regular cooked meat. So, but let's keep it rocking. Okay. So, we start off where we left last chapter with young Brooke, now in the service of Prince Reuven. Reuven? I believe his name's Reuven. Anyway, Reuven says, let's get to it. It says, Reuven says, Candell, I want you to take Brooke as your squire and teach him proper manners and speaking etiquette. And then she says, of course, Prince Reuven. And Brooke says, boy, there sure are a lot of pretty ladies around the palace. And then it says, pretty lady. Skip that one, pretty lady. That's messed up. And then Candell says, stop that. Brooke says, but you're the prettiest of them all, Candell. And she's like, oh my god. She's like, Lady Candell, you are my squire. Like, get the name right, brother. You have to speak correctly when doing this. And then all of a sudden, Brooke is looking at one of the other girls and says, show me your panties. And then Candell's like, Brooke. And then we see Candell with Brooke, and it says, you don't like your uniform? And then he says, if I conform to school culture, I'll lose my touch for writing music, for writing good music. But the convoy uniform, now that's what I want to wear someday. And he's got like a guitar over his shoulder. Bergman J says, I love Brooke being younger. Yeah, this is perfect. This is like a really cool moment. Especially this part where he has the guitar, because he's got sunglasses on. And it's funny because whenever he plays his guitar, I swear he's got those Soul King glasses. So like this is probably where he like got that idea and stuff like that. Yeah, because, like, even. I'm trying to think, did he have his sunglasses on when he used his guitar in, like, his Soul King mode against Big Mom? I don't know if he did, but it is interesting. But then we see Brooke asleep with his guitar, and Candell is looking on him, looking in awe of him, and puts the cover over. And then we see two other people in the battle convoy, and they say, "You're a lucky kid, you know that?" And the other one, who's like eating a sandwich, says, "You get to be Lady Candell's squire." And then Brooke's like, "Yo ho ho." Um, that's just really funny. Um, and then we see Brooke learning swordsmanship from Candell. And Brooke says, "Are you in love with any particular man, Candell?" And she goes, "Lady," and yes, but he is far out of my league. That's a crazy thing to say, considering we know what happens in the future. Um, but also, sorry about that. It's also funny because, you know, Brooke is still messing up the lady part. And Candell says, "So I trained very hard with the sword so that I might be as close to him as possible." She's like blushing a little bit, and he's like, "Huh?" And Brooke's like, "I bet he'd like you if you dressed more ladylike." And then she's like, "That's not necessary. I'm happy simply being at his side." And Brooke said, "His side? Are you talking about..." Hold on, I'm messing this up. "Do you think she's talking about someone else?" I don't know. I'm not sure. Because it would be interesting. She seems genuine in her feelings, but are those feelings for someone else, right? Like, that's the question. Like, is she talking about Garling? You know? Is she talking about someone in the Holy Knights or something like that? Um, or is she truly talking about Reuven? And time will tell. Brooke says, "Me?" And she's like, "No." And Brooke says, "Lady Candell, do you wear men's underwear too?" And she said, "No." And Brooke says, "What? Then show me them." And she says, "Brooke, you still haven't learned any etiquette. When asking a favor of others, you have to speak politely." "Then would you mind showing me your panties, please?" She just punches him in the head. And she's like, "Of course I mind. Forget speaking politely. I need to beat some manners and civility into you. Good grief." And then Candell says, "Strength and etiquette are equally important." And Brooke says, "Really? Then I'll do better. I'll try harder." And then we flash back to Brooke in the flashback saying, "Lady Candell is the light of our admiration." And then Shuri's like, dot, dot, dot. And then Brooke says, "The sun that shines upon our country, which reminds me, the one time a ship from the world government washed up on Asperia, and the kingdom was stunned to encounter a type of authority we'd never experienced before." And Shuri says, "The celestial dragons?" And then Brooke says, "That's right. They certainly threw their weight around." Interesting. And then Brooke says, "Lady Candell was bedridden for several months after that due to fatigue." And you wouldn't believe how gloomy the people were during those months. Yo ho ho. And then Shuri says, oh. And Brooke says, but I shouldn't laugh, but it truly was as if the sun itself had set. That's interesting. That makes me feel like, that makes me almost feel like one of them. I don't. It sounds crazy. It almost sounds like one of them had like his way with Candel or something like that. Because it sounds like that's right. They certainly threw their weight around. She was bedridden for several months after that due to fatigue. And you wouldn't believe how gloomy the people were during those months. I shouldn't laugh, but it was truly as if the sun itself had set. Hi. You want to be part of this? Okay. Let's read a little bit together. And then, however, that was only the precursor to wonderful news, Princess Shuri. And then it said, your father, the beloved uncouth prince, ascended the throne, and at the same time he married your mother, Lady Candel. The stage of Asperia was engulfed in the cheers of the audience. And then you were born, Princess Shuri. The kingdom was all in a tizzy. Show us her face. Eek, she's so cute. Thank God she takes after her mother. And then Brooke says, ahem, I got a bit off track there. My point is, I love your parents dearly. I owe them everything. I would give my life for them. And then he says, I call this one Sacrificial Rock. Then Shuri says, Papa, Mama, well, Brooke, what would you do if it was me in danger? And Brooke said, the same thing, of course. I would give up my life, yes, indeed. And Shuri said, because I'm Papa and Mama's daughter. And she gets all pouty, like you. And then Brooke said, because it's you. And then she says, why did you pause? Be honest with me. And then he gives her a lollipop. And then they train in swordsmanship. And then she sees Reuven and says, Papa. And then Reuven says, Father, don't be a child. And then she says, I love you too, Father. Boop. What's next? Then we see Shuri get a little cut on her, and then it says, when you want to be independent from your parents, why not sing this song for a change, princess? And Brooke starts singing, mind your own beeswax. And Shuri says, ha ha ha, what's that supposed to mean? And Brooke says, it's a phrase from Kamagata, a land to the west. And then he says, mind your own beeswax. And then he continues to say, I ain't some puppy dog lured by the candy store. I ain't a kid at all anymore. And then we see Brooke laughing with Shuri. And it says, the year that Shuri turned 15, all of a sudden someone's playing violin and it's all messed up, and he's like, what the? It sounds awful. And then it says, Asperia lost its music. The kingdom was shrouded in a deep and terrible mist that lasted for half the year. The country's heritage and its treasured instruments all rotted, and the mist curled into smog that swallowed the island whole. From that point on, the streets were filled. Let's see if I can get them over these. There we go. How's that? You have something to say to the people? There we go. From that point on, the streets were filled not with music, but with the sounds of coughing. And Brooke said, let's lift their hearts with and then he starts coughing and hacking, and she's like, oh, hack, yeah. It says the poisonous smog racked the lungs of tens of thousands and took several hundred lives. And then you hear over the radio, the mist will clear, I know it will. You have to be reminded that you can chew on that. In the face of many baffling and horrific events, the kingdom grew weary and numb, and even after the mist lifted, the scars it left were felt deeply by all. Oh, shit. Candel passed. We see Shuri, we see Brooke and Reuven all crying. And then it says, Your Majesty, we can no longer afford to make the heavenly tribute payments to the world government. And then we see Shuri practicing with Brooke. She goes, yeah, and he like parries it and says, whoa. And then Brooke says, sometimes it's as if you can see into the future, princess. And Shuri says, heh, I want to be like my mother. You certainly have the potential, but I don't think your father will allow a princess to fight on the front lines of battle. And she says, Father seems to have something weighing on his mind these days. And Brooke says, I can imagine what it's about, but there's nothing we can do. My only option is to serve the king faithfully. And Shuri says, I thought you wanted to be a pirate, Brooke. And he says, my onus comes first. Dreams are a secondary matter. And she says, oh, okay. Well, when you leave, I'll go with you. And he says, you can't. She says, I will. Reuven, battered and looking awful. Reuven says there's going to be a war against the world government. And everyone's like, huh? And Brooke says, understood, Majesty. And everyone says, wait, Captain, at least tell us why, Your Majesty. And Reuven says, Brooke. And Reuven says, they demanded 1,000 slaves from us. And everyone's like, huh? And then he says, that's the only way to get out of the heavenly tribute this year. Being a slave in the Holy Land might as well be death. And they said, oh, no. Reuven says, the government will be coming here in 2 months, but I'm not going to choose sacrifices to be handed over to them. Damn, what a real one. That's a crazy thing to say. Like, oh man, this is a crazy turn of events. The fact that you can get out of the heavenly tribute by offering 1,000 slaves is kind of nuts, and it kind of makes you wonder. Like, I mean, I remember when Kuma's like the king in Kuma's land was paying the heavenly tribute to basically be part of the world government, to have their backing. And then Kuma did a coup and basically took over, and that's how he became the tyrant king. But and then the world government kind of rolled up on them, and Kuma pretty much destroyed all of them. I mean, it was interesting because they could have truly, the king at the time could have just offered up like I think it was like the southern section of the island that was all like the poverty stricken people. So the fact that they were even paying the heavenly tribute instead of just giving the 1,000 people is an interesting thing. Maybe after what's about to happen here is when the world government stopped doing that. Is that yummy? Interesting. Then we see Brooks, who's walking down the street, and everyone's like, "Is our country doomed, Captain?" And someone says, "Unaffiliated countries turn into a lawless wasteland, don't they?" And all the people are saying, "Is it true that they'll pillage everything we have?" And someone said, "I heard another country in the West Blue got wiped off the map." Hmm. I wonder if they're talking. Well, no, because God Valley wouldn't have happened yet. So that is also interesting that they're talking about another country that got wiped off the map, but they're not talking about God Valley because God Valley shouldn't have happened yet. Because this should be, I mean, Shuri is probably a little bit older, but she said when Shuri turned 15. You're right there. I'm back to chewing. Um, um, but yeah, God Valley shouldn't have happened yet. So that means that they're talking about a completely different area that was wiped off the map. Because Shuri would have been, he's, Brooke said that Shuri would have been 77, which means 15, you know, uh, that would have been 265 years ago. Maybe I'm doing that math wrong. Yes, I am. 62 years ago. So God Valley happened 39 years ago. So that doesn't make sense. Anyway, so Brooke says, "Well, I heard a little story once about a sea brimming with violence." And they're like, "Huh?" And then Brooke begins to sing, "Where the boss don't want to go, full of samurai warriors and towering giants. So watch out for all of them. Give them a little bite, and they'll be weak in the knees like they're running from a swarm of bees. Better think twice, 'cause we got nothing to lose." And all the people are laughing and saying, "Yep, that's true." And someone says, "They've landed at the North Harbor." And someone says, "Get over there, 12th platoon." Okay, so looks like the let's see here, the world government is popping up. It says, "Mind your own beeswax." And it says, "They didn't say it would be this many of them." And someone said, "Don't let them disembark." Mind your own beeswax. And we see Brooke and his saber. And then it says, we're only in the corner of the map, but our name won't be erased just like that. And he's like huffing and huffing, and he just mows through them and says, this is one place you can't steal from us. Yeah. I wonder if we're going to see any CP agents. And then it says, Commander. Someone says, the enemies reach the palace. Block off the stairs. And he says, I'll go in. It says, but why can't I fight? And it's Shuri arguing with Reuven. It says, don't be stupid. If they take you hostage, then our arms are tied. And it looks like a world government and a Marine saying, or a world government and a Marine, and Brooke saying, please be safe, Princess Shuri. And then it says, oh, Princess, the garden we strolled through all those times is now burning. And it says, Your Majesty, the dump where we hung out is ablaze. And it says, mind your own beeswax, mind your own beeswax. The corners of the map are shining. Feel your courage slip away once you taste my vicious blade. And we see Brooke charging up the stairs, saying, Your Majesty, Princess Shuri. And we hear a wham. Oh, wow. Yeah. It looks like a holy knight or something is sitting there. There's like it looks like Mars, because it looks like a bird is in the corner, and it looks like they might have been Domi reversed. And we see Reuven on the floor, dead, and we see Brooke with a crazy look on his face, and Shuri, and then we see this guy smoking a cigar, looking like Don Marlin. Yeah. She does have things to say. She's like, this is crazy. And then we see Shuri say, the war's going to be over, Brooke. And he's like, huh? And she looks at him, like, licking the blood off her cheek and says, aren't you happy? Wow. That's a crazy... That whole panel at the end looks wild. Because not only... I mean, yes, it looks like Marcus Mars is there. The way that beak is and everything like that, and the way we've seen him transform, looks exactly like that. So I wonder if he was there, or he was summoned by one of the Holy Knights, and then they did the Domi Reversi. And this Holy Knight looks actually fucking crazy too, because he does look like Don Marlin. But then Shuri and Reuven both are Domi reversed, because they both have horns and they both have wings. Wow. That's crazy. That's a crazy turn of events. What do you think? Tell me your thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on that? No? Okay. I know. Super exciting. Okay. Let's run through this real quick, because there was a lot there. So like seeing, seeing childhood Brooke growing up is also super cool. But and seeing that he's kind of always been the same person that he is today, um, which is cool. Yes. Okay. Is that your honest opinion?
Controversial, Noel.
Yeah, very controversial.
Hot take.
Super hot take. And I have this. What do you? Don't go after the string on my shorts here.
I can take your one.
Well, now you're a part of the stream. You're a part of it. But also just seeing how down Brooke is for everything that took place here. And seeing the relationship he had with the king and, you know, the king's wife and the princess, like every piece of this is kind of crazy. Like we even get to see, like, I kind of brushed over it, but like you see Brooke putting his umbrella over Shuri. You see Brooke measuring her as she gets taller. You know, he rushed to her aid when she, you know, cut her finger. You know, she got mad at him when he was trying to ask women to see their panties. Another thing that I feel like no one, well, I mean, I haven't seen too much about it, but, you know, it's funny that Shuri was tricking him with like a ghost and he got scared from it, similar to like him being on Thriller Bark and probably Perona and her ghosts. Oh, yeah. We haven't gotten to Perona yet. We're still in Nenny's lobby. You don't know who I'm talking about. I get it.
She said spoilers.
I know. And, you know, him singing while she's fishing, then him being down on, you know, and being sick and bedridden, and her yelling at the nurse and then cooking him a meal to get better. Just, you can see the relationship they have is crazy. And then, like, the tragedy of this, like, whole, like, mist. Okay. I'll take that into consideration. But the mist that came, and the mist is very interesting to me. Because, like, it says the poisonous smog racked the lungs of tens of thousands and took several hundred lives. This may be kind of crazy, but what if this is like the original user of like Caesar Clown's devil fruit? Might have been like a God's Knight or something like that came here to poison the people. And he just so happened to be able to poison, I mean, it says it took several hundred lives, you know, and it even took, you know, like the queen's life, and caused all this trouble. But then all of a sudden it went away, and it all happened on the heels of them not being able to start paying the heavenly tribute. And it says that lasted half the year. I wonder if they like knew that they couldn't pay, so they punished them anyway. There you go. Here. There you go. So very interesting there. But then Brooke, you know, they mourned, but they bounced back. And you can see that Brooke and Shuri are getting closer than ever. And the fact that Reuven managed to, even in his like darkest time where he lost something very, you know, important to him, and on top of that, you know, he also lost his some of his people, and he cares deeply for his people, which is not like a lot of other kings. And he chose to fight the world government instead of bend the knee and give 1,000 people. It's just really cool to see that. And then Brooke being this figure in the kingdom that's like, well, we got nothing left to lose. Ow. You are really ow. Can we not do that? Being like, we got nothing to lose, and everyone's like, that's true, and they all just rally behind him in that way. But then, you know, obviously shit hits the fan from there, and they're in all out war, and then just the ending is crazy. It's crazy. But this is a really good chapter. Like, I'm really enjoying this Brooke backstory. And honestly, I am excited to see what happens next. I feel like next chapter is probably the climax of his backstory. Yeah. You're standing. Big and tall. Yes. Hello. But yeah, no, this is a crazy turn of events. And I'm kind of glad I waited to read this, because then that means I just have to wait till this next weekend to read the next one. Yeah. But yeah, this is a good one. Here.
Bye, everyone.
Overall, I would say this chapter is this chapter in essence really showed us the indomitable spirit that Brooke has, really. Because we so quickly forget, and this is insane, the amount of trauma that Brooke has. He's been around for 80 some years, maybe 90. I'm pretty sure he's like 80 something. But he lost his whole family. He had no one. He was adopted. He lost his adoptive family, obviously. Then he became a pirate after all of this took place. He lost his entire crew. He lost his life. He came back a skeleton and lost his shadow. And then he had to stay in the Floridian Triangle for 50 years. And then he finally found his new crew after losing his last crew and also not having Laboon anymore because they went on their pirate journey. And then he lost that crew in Sabaody and had to spend 2 years away from them. and then he finally got back to them. Just to now be faced with a figure from his past being Princess Shuri, who killed his adoptive father, basically, and dealing with all that trauma. That's crazy. That is an insane amount of trauma to have dealt with. And Brooke has maintained who he was through it all. Even the madness of being alone for 50 years on a ship. Like, this just makes Brooke's character just so much better. And I already thought he was awesome. Like, I gotta say, like, this is one of those things where this took Brooke's like whole character and everything, and like there are so many points where I've loved Brooke in the series, and like he's been MVP to me, and this has elevated him to a place where I'm like, oh my god, like, you know, you never really know how Oda is gonna do like a second backstory, or like give more depth to a character. And I'm just to the point now where it's like he did it with Sanji and I loved it. He's doing it with Brooke. I'm also loving it. Like this is making his character even better. Just like it made Sanji's character so much better to know the trauma that he went through with his actual family and losing his mom. This is like really really good. So I'm just blown away by how Oda can do this. And honestly, this to me is going to, you know, this might show me that whenever Nami has a second backstory, because I feel like that's what's going to happen next, that it's going to be amazing. So I just big ups to Oda on this. He's the GOAT for a reason. He can do shit like this and it be chef's kiss. So I'm totally here for it. I hope you guys are too. But yeah, no, this was incredible. This was a really good chapter. I think this is like an 8.5 for me, just because I love the depth. I love it so much. So you guys will let me know what you think in the comments, because I really want to know your thoughts on this stuff. Like I said, I'm guessing we have one chapter, maybe two. If I'm a betting man, we have two more chapters, because Oda will, now that he's had to go on a break week, kind of out of order, he loves to go like 3-1, like 3 chapters, 1 break week. I'm guessing we're going to do 2 more chapters of Brooke's backstory, wrap it up nicely, then head back to the present, where Brooke is going to be telling this is him telling the Straw Hats what happened, basically. And they're all going to be like, oh my God, like I had no idea that this was that deep for you. And I think it's going to get to the point where, I don't know. Like I have a feeling it's going to get to a place where like then all of a sudden stuff is going to start teeing off in the actual story. Like Luffy's finally going to show up when Loki's on his last leg type stuff, and it's going to be crazy. So I'm here for it. I'm ready for that. I'd love to get back to the regular story, but I do want to see how this wraps up, and I think that it's going to be done really well. So, but like I said, as always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And thank you so much, Burgerman J, for coming through. Let me know how you rated this chapter. I love talking, One Piece with you guys in the comments. Because, I say this every time. One Piece is better as a conversation. And I love having that conversation with you guys. So, as always, I'm your boy Nerdtaku, and I will see you next weekend, because there will be 1186 hot off the presses. So I will see you guys then. Jana.